Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 11th of December. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Palestinian Minister Ziad Abu Ain was buried this afternoon following an autopsy to determine the cause of his death during an altercation with Israeli border police at a West Bank protest yesterday. The IDF has bolstered forces in Judea and Samaria out of concern that further clashes may erupt as Palestinians consider suspending critical security cooperation with Israel. IBA's Aria O'Sullivan has more in this report.
This is the dramatic footage of Ziad Abu Ain's last moments in a confrontation with border police, blocking hundreds of Palestinian protesters from reaching the Jewish settlement of Adi Ad in Samaria. The 55-year-old Palestinian minister against the separation wall and settlements collapsed after being pushed and was evacuated to a hospital where he was pronounced dead. Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon last night issued a statement regretting the death of Abu Ain, and the Palestinian Authority agreed to an Israeli pathologist participating in an autopsy together with a Palestinian and Jordanian doctor. Israel said he died from a heart attack, but the Palestinians claimed he died from inhaling tear gas and being beaten. The official autopsy is to be released later today, but it reportedly confirms he suffered from heart disease and died from a stress-induced heart attack, possibly caused from being grabbed by the neck. Israel rushed reinforcements into Judea and Samaria to boast a true presence there, and this morning there were scattered clashes in the West Bank, but forces were bracing for escalation, particularly after Friday prayers. Palestinian leaders convened in Ramallah last night to discuss what they called the brutal assault that killed Abu Ain.
This is murder. This is a crime. It is part of a long series in which Israel has killed thousands of Palestinians in cold blood and has enjoyed full impunity. It is time that Israel is held to account. I believe we do need an immediate, impartial investigation into this incident and into Israel's whole policy of targeting Palestinians.
Efforts were being made to curtail calls by some Palestinians to hold security cooperation with Israel.
This is the really most important point, is taking care and preventing an escalation of the violence. We don't want that to happen. We are currently speaking with our counterparts in the Palestinian security apparatus in order to prevent an escalation and stop the cycle of violence that we faced.
Abu Ain was a member of the Fatah Revolutionary Council, commonly known as the Abu Nidal terrorist organization. He had been serving a life sentence for involvement in the 1979 terrorist bombing that killed 2 Israeli teenagers in Tiberias, but was among the 1,150 Palestinians released during a 1985 prisoner exchange for 3 IDF soldiers who were captured during the First Lebanon War. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu conveyed a personal message to the Palestinian Authority, pledging Israel would investigate Abu Ain's death and urging restraint. Aria O'Sullivan for IBA News.
The head of the National Institute for Forensic Medicine at Abu Kabir says that there is no chance that Ziad Abu Ain was beaten by Israeli soldiers.
There is no major dispute between us, the Israeli doctors, the Palestinians, and the Jordanian doctors. We agree on the findings and the interpretation of the findings. There are some questions still about some bruises or some injuries in the mouth of this person, which can be caused by the resuscitation efforts or can be caused by a trauma. There is no evidence that he was beaten in the chest by a gun or any other instrument. The signs in the chest are due to resuscitation, and we are in total agreement regarding this issue, all the doctors that attended the autopsy.
United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon didn't wait for the results of the autopsy or investigation into Abu Ain's death, and instead issued a statement calling his death brutal.
The Secretary General is deeply saddened by the death of Palestinian Minister Ziad Abu Ain after a demonstration in the village of Turmus Aya that resulted in a confrontation with Israeli security forces. The Secretary General expresses his condolences to his family, the Palestinian people, and the government of national consensus. The Secretary General calls on the Israeli authorities to conduct a swift and transparent investigation into the circumstances of the brutal death of Minister Abu Ain. He also calls on all sides to exercise maximum restraint and avoid further escalation.
U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki issued condolences to the Abu Ain family and the Palestinian Authority, while also calling on Israel to conduct a thorough investigation.
We are deeply concerned by the death of Palestinian Authority senior official Ziad Abu Ain, which reportedly occurred during a protest in the West Bank. We offer our condolences to his family and the Palestinian Authority. We've seen the reports that the Israelis are looking into an investigation into this incident. As always, we call for this investigation to be swift, fair, and transparent. And at this difficult time, we continue to call on both sides to work to lower tensions and prevent an escalation of violence.
The State Department also related to Secretary of State John Kerry's upcoming meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, set to be held in Rome on Monday, and the need to continue diplomacy despite Israeli elections.
Really, there's a range of proposals out there. There are a growing number of countries that are pushing for action on this issue at the UN. This warrants discussion with Israel, the Palestinians, and key members of the international community, and certainly that will be part of their focus as well. We're not going to Israel. Obviously, there's diplomacy and foreign policy that needs to happen even in months before an election.
Turning now to the elections and several headlines. We have the first merger of two main parties, the coalescing of the ruling party, the naming of a new party, and the retirement of a longtime Knesset member. Here with all the latest is IBA's political correspondent, Eli Wogelenter.
We'll start with the big news of a merger between the Labour Party and Hatnuah, Isaac Herzog and Tzipi Livni, a joint list that the two hope will carry both of them to the Prime Minister's office. That's right, a list that will make both of them Prime Minister. Under the agreement announced last night, if their list wins the election and forms the next government, Herzog would serve the first 2 years and Livni the remainder of the term. The two parties will run together on a joint list for the next Knesset in the March 17th election. Despite Labour having 15 seats in the outgoing legislature and Hatnuah not expected to pass the new 3.25% electoral threshold, Herzog gave in to Livni's demand for a rotation in the Prime Minister's office. Livni will be second on the joint candidates list, which will include reserve slots for Hatnuah MKs Amir Peretz and Amram Mitzna, but not for the Hatnuah faction's remaining three lawmakers. Herzog is also seeking a deal with Kadima that will reserve a slot for its chairman, Shaul Mofaz. A name for the joint list will be announced in the coming days, but for now it's being called the New Zionist Center. The merger sets the stage for Yesh Atid's Yair Lapid, who himself tried to woo Livni to run with him, to present himself at the center of the political map. He spoke this morning at the Jerusalem Post conference here in Jerusalem.
For too long, security issues in our countries have been the subject of a debate between two mistakes. The left is wrong for blaming only Israel for the failure of the negotiations, naively assuming, despite all evidence, that peace is easy to achieve if only we say yes to the Palestinians. The right, on the other hand, wrongly believes that no agreement is worthwhile and we are better off doing nothing. My approach comes from a very different set of assumptions. I believe that peace will be very difficult to achieve, but an agreement is not a gift we give the Palestinians. Rather, separation from them is the very best way to ensure a country's future security and prosperity. The State of Israel will defeat any enemy that threatens our security. But absorbing 4 million Palestinians will make us less secure and make it more difficult for us to remain both a Jewish and a democratic state, and will further ruin our relationship with the United States and the international community.
Turning to the ruling Likud party, and an internal victory was scored last night by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Likud Central Committee voted in favor of Netanyahu's proposal to advance primaries for party leadership to December 31st. In addition to moving the primary date forward, Netanyahu's proposal would allow the party chairperson to reserve the 11th and 24th spots on the Knesset list for candidates of his choosing, and it would ensure 4 female candidates within the first 34 spots. Overall, 65% of the Likud voters voted in favor of Netanyahu's proposal. Netanyahu's push for early primary was reportedly meant to prevent former Likud Interior Minister Gideon Sa'ar from challenging him for leadership of the party. Sa'ar is reportedly preparing for a campaign and may even establish a political faction of his own. And we now have a new name for the new party. Former Likud MK Moshe Kachlon announced last night that his party will be called Kulanu, meaning all of us. Kachlon did not announce the names of any of the candidates who will be running with him. However, he said his slogan to the voters would be like Kachlon, a phrase coined ironically by Netanyahu when he was encouraging ministers in his cabinet to follow the example of Kachlon, who, when he was communications minister, engineered the plan to significantly reduce the cost of cell phone service in Israel. And finally, Labour MK Benjamin Ben Eliezer, nicknamed Fuad, who is currently hospitalized with an infection, wrote to Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein and announced his departure from political life. Ben Eliezer cited his health as the reason for his decision, though there are reports that the police are about to file an indictment against him for accepting bribes. I spoke this morning with Jerusalem Post diplomatic correspondent Gil Hoffman. He told me that he thought that the merger of Tzipi Livni and Isaac Herzog would be good for the leftist bloc, even if it might upset some of the Labour Party faithful.
It's very important for Isaac Herzog to be seen as the leader of the Israeli left, to be seen as the main alternative to Netanyahu, and for that he was willing to pay a hefty price of making a deal with Tzipi Livni, the previous politician who succeeded in winning the most votes for the center-left camp, which she did a couple elections ago. And so he made this deal, and now he and Netanyahu, for different strategic reasons, will be playing this as a two-man race. Yair Lapid was here at the Jerusalem Post diplomatic conference, and while he did not mention Livni, he did make a point of painting himself as a centrist in order to say, I am the leader of a camp too. Livni and Herzog can lead the left camp. Netanyahu can lead the right camp. I lead the centrist camp.
Won't he be seen as a very weak politician? He's making a deal when he stands twice as many seats as Livni has. He's given her the number 2 spot, and he's made a rotation deal.
I understand that people are making fun of Herzog for giving up too much in this deal. But you have to understand that the way it works is that the Prime Minister of Israel will be decided not in the ballot box, but in the president's residence. He will choose who can form a government based on who can build the most stable government. The person who can build the most stable government is the kind of person who can compromise the most. And right now, no one can argue that Herzog's not a big compromiser.
How will this play out with Labour's hardcore supporters who have seen their leader make this kind of a deal?
They'll kvetch the Labour voters, the Labour members, the Labour Central Committee members, even Labour members of Knesset behind the scenes, and then they'll give in because Herzog is the leader, and Herzog is giving them at least an outside chance of returning to power in a way that he wasn't before. The man had 13 seats yesterday. We'll see what he has tomorrow.
What does this merger mean for Netanyahu in his campaign now going forward?
Netanyahu's campaign strategy all along has been to build up Herzog as an alternative in order to scare voters on the right into voting for him and not voting for other right-wing parties like Naftali Bennett's Jewish Home Bayit Yehudi or like Avigdor Lieberman's Yisrael Beitenu party. And so this deal between Livni and Herzog very much does play into Netanyahu's hands. And now you're going to see, just like we saw Gilad Erdan here at the Jerusalem Post conference, the right, the Likud paint Tzipi Livni and Herzog as the Palestinians' dream because of the concessions that they would make.
Will Lapid be able to make the claim now that he's in the center? Tzipi Livni's going to say the same thing.
We've seen yesterday that Livni and Herzog kept on referring to themselves as the centrist Zionist camp. And that leaves Lapid with nowhere to walk. And he's fighting with his elbows to reclaim that center and call them left. Everyone is all going to paint each other the way they want to for political reasons. Netanyahu may also paint himself as a centrist, but we'll see if the international community believes that.
And how smart a move was that to call themselves the Zionist Party in that merger?
I know abroad that might not be as popular a term as it used to be, but in Israel, people are very proud to be Zionist. And so trying to attach that word to yourself is a smart political move.
In other news, the High Court of Justice has rejected an appeal from Balad MK Hanin Zawabi seeking to overturn the ruling from the Knesset Ethics Committee, barring her from parliamentary activity for 6 months. The suspension was imposed after the Israeli Arab lawmaker gave interviews saying that she didn't consider the murder abduction of 3 Jewish teenagers by Palestinians last June to be terrorism, as well as her support of Hamas rocket attacks against Israel during Operation Protective Edge. In their ruling, the 5-justice panel found that Zoabi's comments and their timing were beyond the bounds of decency, adding that they also chose to not strike down the injunction because most of the penalty will pass during the Knesset recess and is therefore not particularly severe. In response to the High Court decision, Zoabi accused the judges of having succumbed to political pressure and insisted on her people's right to struggle. The Supreme Court has upheld the conviction of Marie Pazam, who appealed to have her life sentence overturned, claiming innocence of involvement in the 2008 murder of her 4-year-old daughter, Rose. The justices took an even tougher stance in the Tel Aviv District Court in 2011 that found Pazam guilty of soliciting her daughter's murder. The Supreme Court also rejected the appeal of Pazam's partner, Roni Ron, who was convicted of carrying out the murder. Ron was also the victim's grandfather and Marie Pazam's former father-in-law. He retracted his earlier confession, now claiming that it was the child's mother who killed her and threw her into a suitcase containing her body into the Yarkon River, where it was found in September 2008. The justices ruled that evidence proves that the two conspired together to commit the crime in their determination to remove Rose from their home, including her premeditated murder. Following the release of a report from the U.S. Intelligence Committee that the CIA misled the Bush White House and the public over the torture of detainees after the 9/11 attacks, there are now calls in the United Nations for the prosecution of those responsible.
Which occurred. That's not really being argued about very much anymore. I think that's been recognized by the President of the United States. It's been recognized by the Senate committee that produced the report. Very clearly stated by Senator Dianne Feinstein yesterday, John McCain and other senators as well. So the fact that torture took place, the fact that quite a few different types of torture took place, and on many occasions. So the next step is to see where that leads us in terms of responsibility. Obviously, the follow-up debate, I think, will be about accountability, about whether or not people can be charged for not just people who carried out the torture, but people who order it, people who devise the policy of it, etc.
Just months before the commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, British Prime Minister David Cameron paid tribute to the 1.5 predominantly Jewish victims who perished at the site. Auschwitz is located near the Polish village of Oswiecim and was part of the network of Nazi concentration and extermination camps operated by the Third Reich during the Second World War. In his message entered in the memorial book commemorating his first journey to the camp, the British leader wrote that he came because he wanted to see the place for himself where the darkest chapter of human history happened. After placing a candle in memory of the dead, Cameron said that all those who were murdered at Auschwitz and the other Nazi concentration camps must never be forgotten. Cameron expressed his hope that as those who survived the horrors become fewer in number to provide direct testimony, that the Holocaust Commission will continue to teach future generations about the tragic events. Today, the epic film Exodus, Gods and Kings, opens in Israel as part of the world premiere. Nearly 60 years after the blockbuster movie, The Ten Commandments, came out, this new version of the Exodus story portrays the biblical tale of Moses and his attempts to lead the enslaved Israelites to freedom from their Egyptian masters. In this release, Moses experiences a vision after being hit on the head by rocks, causing him to return to Egypt to free the Israelites from the new Pharaoh Ramses, who happens to be the stepfather that he grew up with, as the adopted son of the old Pharaoh Seti. Moses is played by actor Christian Bale, who had an unexpected way of preparing for the role.
My first stop was Life of Brian, Mel Brooks, in History of the World. You got to look at it that way, because something with as much gravitas and weight as this can quite easily become unintentionally very funny. And we had a number of takes that were like that. But then looking at all the various portrayals, essentially reading the Torah. You read the Torah from beginning to end. It doesn't sound like the most exciting thing to do in the world. I tell you, it is fascinating. And what you discover is realize that this man is one of the most complex figures that I've ever read about in history.
The journey for him was coming to terms with who he must be, and then the 9 years out of Egypt is where he sits on that and ponders on that, and therefore I think a lot of it is the action of his own conscience. So that meeting on the mountain in Sinai, when you meet Malak, who is the messenger or a shepherd boy, it could be his conscience as well.
It's amazing how on one hand Ridley has managed to kind of pay respect and be respectful of the religious aspects of the story, and at the same time it's a movie, and at the same time he's kind of on the other hand looking at sort of the world in a like attempting to find historical answers and accuracy as much as we can, given the knowledge we have of the time and the environment, the culture.
For me, myself, having had the privilege of performing in 3 Holocaust films, I think it's a very timely reminder of the extraordinary struggle of this people to be where they are now, who have suffered so much that against the odds they're there, and we should nurture them and cherish them and thoroughly examine their history and place in our great mythology and history.
Yeah, I think you can see like a real, it's biblical, and it's like a true story, but you can see a real man fight for his own people, and you can see how he's suffering. So that's a very human way to see.
Looks like a great film. Now taking a look at local finance, and the shekel today gained strength against all major foreign currencies, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange took a dip. Here's a look at the mid-afternoon numbers. Well, it looks like we can expect a wet, rainy weekend. The IBA weather team says that tomorrow we will see a drop in temperatures and isolated showers in the southern and eastern regions by afternoon. Here's the forecast at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'll be back tomorrow to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. Hope to see you then. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a pleasant evening and shalom from Jerusalem.